Okay, something absolutely stunning and really unprecedented has just happened. The sitting leader of a sovereign country, Nicolás Maduro of Venezuela, is now in United States custody. He's literally on his way to the US to face charges. So how on earth did we get here? Let's break it all down.
The story blew up with this pretty dramatic announcement from the U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi. She didn't just confirm that they had him, but she laid out the incredibly serious charges he's facing. She also made a point to thank the U.S. military for what she called an incredible and highly successful mission. And you can imagine, that statement just sent absolute shockwaves across the globe.
All right, so what's the official reason for doing something this drastic? I mean, this is a huge deal. Well, the U.S. Department of Justice has unsealed an indictment with some very grave charges that they say led to this operation. Let's take a look at what they are.
And wow, the severity here it's really something. We're not talking about simple corruption. The top charge is narco-terrorism, and that's a really key phrase. The accusation is that Maduro's government used the power of the state to flood the United States with cocaine, not just to make money, but to use drugs as a weapon. Then you have cocaine importation and a bunch of weapons charges on top of that. Essentially, the U.S. is accusing the head of another country of running a giant international criminal organization. But look, this didn't just happen out of the blue. To really get the full picture, you gotta rewind a bit and look at Maduro's, let's say, controversial time in power and the unbelievable crisis that has just completely swallowed Venezuela for more than a decade now.
So this quick timeline kind of shows how everything spiraled. Maduro gets power in 2013, but the real, critical turning point was that 2024 election. After he claimed he won, in a vote that almost every other country called a total sham, he started a massive crackdown. We're talking arresting thousands of people and crushing any and all dissent.
And this part is so crucial to understanding everything. Most of the world just doesn't see Maduro as the legitimate president. The real opposition leader, this incredibly popular figure named Maria Corina Machado, she was actually banned from running. So she threw all her support behind a different candidate, Edmundo Gonzalez, who everybody believes won that election in a landslide. And then the result was just stolen.
And then you see this number. Just let that sink in for a second. Nearly 8 million people. That is a staggering number of human beings who have fled Venezuela under Maduro. And they're not just leaving because of politics. They're running from a completely collapsed economy and a humanitarian disaster.
So, with that crisis just getting deeper, and with no real democratic way forward, the United States started to ramp up the pressure directly on Maduro's regime, and that really set the stage for what we're seeing right now.
You know, in the months right before the capture, the U.S. started making some serious moves. This wasn't just sanctions. We're talking military strikes on ships they believe were carrying drugs, and even seizing oil tankers. These actions were designed to squeeze Maduro both militarily and economically. You could feel the noose tighten.
Now, at the very heart of the U.S. case is this group called the Cartel de los Soles, which means Cartel of the Suns. The U.S. says this isn't some random criminal gang. They claim it's a drug cartel that is run by the highest-ranking officials in the Venezuelan government and military. And the name? Soles, or suns, or the star-like insignias the top Venezuelan generals wear on their shoulders. So the name itself is basically pointing the finger directly at the military that's been propping Maduro up for years. So, as you can probably guess, snatching a sitting head of state has sent massive shockwaves all across Latin America, and it's sparking some really deep fears about what kind of dangerous precedent this sets.
This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of the anxiety in the region. You have to understand, even countries that couldn't stand Maduro are looking at this, at the United States going into another country and taking its leader, and they are deeply, deeply worried. It brings up these fundamental and frankly pretty terrifying questions about who's really in charge.
For so many people in Latin America, this feels like we've time-traveled back to a really painful period of what's called gunboat diplomacy. That was an era when the U.S. would just show up with its military might and topple governments it didn't like. It's a really bloody and messy part of history that has left some very long, bitter memories. And an action like this, well, it brings all of that right back to the surface. And that leads us to the most immediate and probably most chaotic question of all. Back on the ground in Venezuela, with Maduro gone, who is actually in control right now?
Well, in the immediate chaos, Maduro's inner circle is scrambling to keep their grip on power. They've sent police and these civilian militias, known as colectivos, out onto the streets. And their job isn't just to look tough, it's to actively shut down anyone who might be out there celebrating the fact that Maduro is gone.
Right now, there are two main figures everyone is watching. You've got the vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, who technically is constitutionally the next in line, but then you have Diosdado Cabello. He's the powerful Minister of Internal Affairs and has long been seen as Maduro's number two. So what we have now is a very tense, very real power struggle kicking off to see who fills that void.
So this all leaves us with these massive unanswered questions. Inside Venezuela, there's this dangerous power vacuum opening up. And on the world stage, a precedent has just been set that could totally change how countries deal with each other. And for those 8 million people who fled, this brings a new, maybe fragile sense of hope. One thing is for sure, the fallout from this single event is going to be felt for years and years to come.